has had their lunches already or is about to start, because we have a lot of interesting content prepared for you today. My name is Adrian. I'll be your host today. I'm a senior manager for Hays Hong Kong and a member of Hays Asia Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee as well. Currently, I lead 5 teams: legal, accounting and finance, life sciences, marketing, and HR. So if you have any recruitment needs, you know who to find. First of all, thanks for joining our Hays and SHL webinar on a very important and real topic. And that perhaps is being discussed at many management meetings today, which is equipping Gen Z to lead in a new era of work. Every generation has characteristics which are partly shaped by societal events that they've experienced, and Gen Z, despite the trials of the pandemic, possess unique skills that are an asset in today's workplace and may define the future of work and leadership. And today, in collaboration with SHL, along with our 4 esteemed guests, we'll be exploring this topic. But before we get started, let me share some housekeeping rules with you. So this webinar will run for approximately 2 hours. It will be recorded, and a follow-up email with the recording will also be sent to all the attendees. You're going to be muted throughout the session. So if you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A box, and we can get to them at the end. We will also have live interpretation in Chinese, which will be available. And on the panel, Zoom panel, click on the interpretation icon, which should be like a globe, and select Chinese. If you chose to listen in Chinese, please also select to mute original audio to avoid overlapping voices of the speaker and interpreter. To change back from Chinese to English, select off to hear English. So for those of you that don't know, let me introduce the 2 partners that made this happen today. Hays, we're a UK-based multinational recruitment firm, and we're experts in recruiting qualified, professional, and skilled people across a wide range of specialized industries and professions. We operate across the private and public sectors, dealing in permanent positions, flexible solutions, and temporary assignments. We're located in 33 countries around the world with 267 offices and have over 10,000 staff at your service. As for our co-hosts of the event, SHL, they are a global leader in HR technology, psychometric science, transforms businesses by leveraging the power of people, science, and technology. They have an unrivaled workforce data and highly validated talent solutions, and provides organizations with the workforce and scale to optimally leverage their people's potential that maximize business outcomes. With 45 years of talent expertise, they are the trusted technology partner to more than 10,000 companies worldwide and across more than 150 countries. Now, with some of the basic introductions out the way, let me bring on our first speaker, Eddie Choi, who is a senior consultant from SHL for his keynote speech. Over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, Adrian. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time to be with us today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, maybe the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share, some of the insights, through SHL research around how do we equip the Gen Z to lead in the new era of work through understanding, contextualizing, and co-developing, our personalized learning journeys with Generation Z leaders. Okay, so without further ado, so you wouldn't be surprised to know that, maybe in the next couple of years, by 2025, almost 30% of our workforce in OECD countries will be Generation Z. And how we define Generation Z is really, individuals who are born after 1996, and they bring with them a different set of capabilities, a different set of thinking processes, and a different set of how they view in terms of their cognition towards the world. Okay, and what's also interesting, that we have also found out that across APAC, the region that we are in, 1 in every 4 individuals will be a Generation Z in the next 3 years. And what this means for, our APAC region is really the increasing importance in terms of how Generation Z will be a viable player in terms of affecting things around consumer preferences, how we align our business strategies to suit, this particular generation, as well as how we interact with this generation as we enter a workforce within the APAC region as well. So, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty, I also like to share with everyone the factors that shape Generation Z. So likewise with all the other generations as well, there are certain unique environmental factors that shape Generation Z as well. So the first being, no stranger to this, the pace of technological advances. So unlike, for example, millennials, Gen Zs, they are digital natives. So what we mean by that is they actually are born in an age of digital advancement compared to millennials like myself. So we are considered digital explorers, where we move from an age that is not so advanced, slowly exploring our way in a digital age. But compared to millennials, Generation Z, they are born within this era, and the pace of technological advances really affect, how they view the world when it comes to speed of transmission of information, or when it comes to communicating with others as well. And how this, kind of impacts would also be the next factor around, because of these technological advances, there is also just a greater access to knowledge. And what I mean by this is a greater access to resources that are not available in other generations as readily. For example, the advancement of the World Wide Web, the advancements of information sharing platforms and domains enables, our Gen Z individuals to really get access to this knowledge. And it's also no surprise that we are really in this advanced knowledge sharing economy. And with this knowledge as well, also comes factors around, having a more competitive environment as well. Because with the idea around an open access economy, with great technological changes, thereabout also brings in the idea around demands and competitiveness within the environment, because a term that we use in psychology is really around what we call social comparison. And what we have also found is that within Generation Z, because the economy is so open, there's really a lot more chances for opportunities and challenges around social comparison. So the likelihood of myself as a Gen Z comparing myself to another person, regardless of how much better off the person is or how much not better off the person is, we do have a lot more of those coming up for Gen Z individuals as well. And lastly, it seems to be for every generation, there is a form of a significant event. Again, speaking as a millennial, the significant event for us would be, of course, the economic boom, back in the day. But something interesting for Gen Z is also the significant event around COVID-19, which is also something still close to our hearts at this present day as well. So the COVID-19 really is a great kind of precipitating factor to kind of emphasize all the other factors that I've mentioned earlier before. With a significant event like COVID-19, it's become a lot more competitive when Gen Z enters the workplace. They do have so much information, so much opportunities to look for information online around how to apply for jobs. We talk about remote working. So all these are examples of how COVID-19 as a unique, significant event that drives some of these factors as well. And in the recent study that we have done, I would say most of our Generation Z candidates that we have assessed and surveyed use terms like anxious and being worried and uncertain about their future when it comes to finding a job in the workplace. And also another point just to illustrate the competitiveness within this environment is, for every one graduate, at any time they're applying for 10 different graduate trainee programs or 10 apprenticeship programs as well. And this really brings up about the point that I mentioned around the greater access to knowledge, competitiveness, and technological advances. So, being an organization that's really keen on research as well, we decided to take a step further. So what we have done here is also to pluck out, different candidates who have been through our SHL psychometric assessments, our work with different clients across the region as well. Of these candidates who have applied to graduate or management trainee programs. And I just also want to share a subset of the results as well. So if you could focus our attention on this left-hand side on this spiderweb chart. So this is actually based off our personality testing tool across Gen Z candidates that have applied for graduate trainee programs. And if you can see from here, I'll just pause here for a moment. Are some of these findings, kind of contrary to our, some of our preconceived notions or ideas around Gen Zs? For example, just based off the result, Gen Zs might not come across as confident enough, or they might not like to connect with others face to face as much. But on the other hand, you see things where they kind of show great preferences too, would be around things like adaptation, an increased tendency to worry, and also increased tendency to prefer a more democratic working style at the workplace. Okay, so I'll just pause it for a couple of seconds as we kind of gather our thoughts around aligning some of our own preconceptions and some of these results here as well. Okay, and with the key findings that we find from this particular research is that, this results is, I would suppose, in the past 2 years as well, really Gen Z candidates feeling the need to adopt a bigger picture thinking as well as a more conceptual level thinking, as well as being flexible to different workarounds as well. So it could be the case where I could be giving you a very generic guideline, and then Gen Z tends to prefer to be more flexible using some of these kind of guidelines to kind of find a workaround solution to solve different problems. So that's the first key insight that we see. The second key insight is also interesting. It could also be another effect about the significant event of COVID that I mentioned earlier. A preference to plan ahead, not to be kind of surprised by what's going to come up next. They are a lot more cautious in their decision-making processes, a lot more cautious when it comes to setting expectations and managing expectations at the workplace. So this again came out really strongly as an insight. And lastly, the other insight would be the work-life separation and equal consensus as well. So work-life separation, what I mean is separating your work, from your professional life, as well as preferring a more democratic approach at the workplace where there's more transparency. So this is just for graduate candidates per se. So again, at SHL, we just want to push it up a notch again. So what we have done is also to look at what about high potential Generation Z candidates as well, candidates or leaders or employees that have been earmarked for high potential. What are some of their strengths and what are some of the areas of development that we can consider, when we are working to them in the capacity of a HR professional or as a leader. So something that came up really strongly is the idea around Generation Z high potentials. They do exceptionally well on what we call critical thinking. If you can see from the graph on the left, the dark blue graphs representing the percentage of Generation Z high potentials. And if you look at the category under high, the dark blue column, what it means is that we have more than expected number of Gen Z high potentials scoring really high on what we call deductive reasoning. So I'll break down what it means by deductive reasoning to everyone here. So deductive reasoning is also what we call as top-down reasoning. So across, I would say 2 years, the idea around top-down reasoning has shown up really strongly for Generation Z high potentials as well. And what this means is being able to draw links between a generic set of information to solve certain specific problems. So for example, I could be giving you a set of generic SOP or some guidance, and then being able to use that and to fit them into certain specific decisions. So that's something that we see Gen Z high potentials doing really strong on. However, something interesting that also caught our attention is that when we look at, from a legacy perspective, executives and leaders who are not Gen Zs in that sense, they do typically well, very well, on what we call bottom-up reasoning. And what we mean by this is being able to use specific use cases and specific analogies, or what we call rule of thumb, and expand it to solve wider issues. It could be around strategy or it could be around processes. So you can see, there's really a great synergy around them. And wouldn't it be fantastic if we could kind of combine these two different strengths in thinking styles, and we could imagine the potential at the workplace when it comes to solving different business problems. Okay, so that's the first insight I want to share from our recent research as well. The other one would be something interesting. You probably would be very likely to see a Gen Z high potential raising their hand, to take on different challenges and different business tasks as well. And that's something that came up really strongly in our research as well. And this is something, you could expect a lot of Gen Z high potentials to do. However, Also from our research, we see that almost one in every 3 Gen Z high potentials, they don't do particularly well on what we call coping with pressures and setbacks at the workplace. And what this means collectively as an insight is that while there's a high chance that your Gen Z high potentials could be really proactive at the workplace, taking ownership and autonomy for their own decisions, but where do we kind of draw the line? How do we manage the challenge around managing, their work and emotions constantly during times of stress? Are they taking on too much? And do they even know that they're taking on too much? So this is something, as leaders, as SHL practitioners, or even Gen Zs who are in this call as well, something we should think through about. Okay. And the other insight that came out really strongly is around Gen Z high potentials, really showing great scores around creating and innovation, especially through some of the assessments that they've done as part of the selection or development process with SHL, creating and innovating new solutions, formulating new concepts, taking a general idea and making them into an idea of their own. And this is something that we've seen even more strongly compared to millennials, that Gen Z high potentials are kind of generating as well. But an area where they don't do well at all is the area of planning and organizing. So what I mean by that is actually around adhering to certain processes and taking a more structured and guided approach when it comes to their own development, or when following certain processes that could help them achieve their work goals a lot faster and more efficient. So again, with this kind of paradox around, having a creative mindset, but having to balance that with a structured approach at the workplace is something that, we should all think of, maybe we should review more of in terms of how we work and help our Generation Z high potential kind of grow as well. And lastly, I also want to share something important as well, something probably that will come on our panel discussion. What are some of the values and motivations that drive some of these Generation Z high potentials? 4 big motivating factors. The first is around personal growth. Are we giving them enough opportunities to grow within the workplace? Do we give them different challenges to grow at the workplace as well? This is probably a reason why graduate or management training programs are getting more and more popular over the past 5 to 10 years as well. The next part would then be around achievement. Are we giving them stretch assignments that challenge themselves, to challenge the Gen Z high potentials, to make sure that they're constantly being stimulated in terms of challenges and how it aligns to their personal, kind of expectations around being challenged at the workplace. The third factor is around interest. If a Gen Z candidate is being made to crunch numbers or to do a lot of financial analysis, and this is something that he or she doesn't like to do at all at the workplace, and this is probably something that will be demotivating or disengaging for the particular Gen Z high potential as well. And lastly, this is something that we have seen really coming up in the past 2 years as well, the idea around personal principles and fairness. Are we putting across a strong inclusive and fairness policy within our organization? Is the Gen Z high potential envisioning, certain processes and procedures at the workplace to be fair, to be transparent, things around pay parity, things around development opportunities? Are all these being perceived as fair within the workplace? So of course, different generations would also, you probably would argue that across different generations, this will all be applicable as well. But these are really the 4 ones that have even more emphasis compared to the other generations as well. And this is something we should definitely look at when it comes to kind of co-creating some of this development with our Gen Zs to equip them with the right skills moving forward as leaders. Okay, so now that we have kind of looked through some of this really exciting research that SHL have worked with many of our clients, the next part I want to share is really contextualize and co-develop. Are we collecting enough data points to really truly understand our Generation Z employees? So what I have just shown is really a lot of high-level trends across different organizations, across research that we have worked with different organizations, but every organization is different. So do we know and do we understand your Generation Z within the fabric of your organization? How are we collecting data points to understand our Gen Z leaders and employees' competencies and preferences? So another visualization here, again, I'm just taking a subset of some of the work we have been working with our clients on management training programs and graduate training programs over the past 2 years. And these are really some popular assessments to collect data points of Generation Z candidates as well. If you can see from here, I would say most of our clients having some of these programs, they do things around IQ testing, cognitive ability testing, they leverage personality and interviews as part of their recruitment process to understand the behaviors and motivations that kind of shape, good Gen Z candidates as well. But going beyond that, there's also the idea around not just using some of these psychometric tools, but once your Gen Z employees have come on board in your company, having to constantly engage them, having coffee chats and having constant touch points around developing them is also a key. So a combination of, some of these great quantitative data together with qualitative data in terms of our day-to-day interactions with your Gen Z employees will really help to shed some great light around how do we kind of further develop and work with your Gen Z employees as well. And, having some of this data would then enable you to really contextualize some of your learning and development initiatives from a career pathing approach or from an individual development approach as well. So again, with some of the work with our clients and hearing from most of our clients across the region as well, the next part then is to really co-create what we call this kind of personalized development journeys with our Gen Z employees or even those that have been earmarked as leaders as well, in terms of creating very personalized touchpoint projects and journeys with our Gen Z leaders. This is a point that we've been hearing from our clients a lot as well. The other point would be around also continuously developing new initiatives to encourage ownership of this kind of challenging business-related projects, but at the same time, also having that safe space that Gen Z high potentials or leaders could also, be in terms of making mistakes or making errors as well. Having that safe space when it comes to learning. And thirdly would be around balancing autonomy in delegation with structure in guidance and feedback. So how are we giving our Gen Z leaders the independence to run on their own, but also not to kind of take that training wheels off right at the start, but to also have that kind of constant touch points with our Gen Z leaders as well. Some initiatives that our clients are working on is around things like a more balanced approach when it comes to lattice career paths, horizontally and vertically, as well as what we call action learning projects. Having some of these milestone projects that your Gen Z leaders could take on, but also having that mentorship support and manager support when it comes to solving some of these exciting new business challenges within the workplace. And lastly, this is something that I feel really excited about, would be around creating a meaningful, learning environment and ecosystem for growth for our Gen Z leaders as well. And that comes with around empowering them as people managers to help them find their meaning and purpose in their work, constantly by understanding what motivates them at the workplace. Right at the very get-go, during the recruitment stage, during the onboarding stage, to engaging them every step of the way as employees. And number two is we're also seeing a trend when it comes to improving connections, for some of these graduates or for some of these, Gen Z leaders as well, by creating virtual communities. So we do have some great examples with clients that are using even things like metaverse, Gather Town, some of these interesting new kind of virtual communities to connect, these graduates and these Gen Z leaders as well, for them to share their knowledge with each other. And lastly, taking into account the capitalization of intergenerational strengths in business. This is also important as well, because again, this is not something about Gen Z, it's about how Gen Z can better integrate themselves within the workplace so that they can develop. And that could come in a form with some of our client discussions around reverse mentoring, not just mentoring on its own, but reverse mentoring. So, a millennial as well as a Gen Z leader could have that mentoring, vice versa as well. And that's something that we see very common across organizations, and having virtual work groups. It could be, placed on the intranet, or it could be placed on a virtual platform as well. So before I end my speech, I actually also want to say that, all of us here in the audience, we're all in this together. So it's not just about Gen Z per se. I understand through this speech, we talk about, Gen Z, they are more likely to be this, Gen Z needs to be that. but really it's about how we are working together as an organization. How do we think about all these intergeneration interactions? So a Generation X executive C-suite leader, a millennial manager, a Generation Z manager, a Generation Z, individual contributor. How do we understand each other more, help ourselves to develop ourselves even more as well? And together is a combined effort. So we are in it together. Okay, so with that, I actually come to the end of my presentation. So definitely we'll get to hear a lot of these real-life examples during the panel discussion as well. And I'll pass the time on back to Adrian. Thanks, Adrian. Over to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for sharing the speech. There's some very interesting findings, to understand kind of the challenges that Gen Zs may face, and some of the kind of interesting propositions and ideas and analysis that different businesses have done to help facilitate the process is definitely very interesting. So now we're going to go into kind of the most important part of today, which is the panel discussion with our esteemed guests. So the topic is around equipping Gen Z to lead in the new era of work. And before we start, I just want to kind of advise everyone, the session will be 1 hour. And please feel free to ask questions and type them in the Q&A box. I already see one question, and we'll get to them at the very end after the discussion. So let me introduce Anise Chan. She's the Human Resources Director of APAC for TransUnion. Anise, would you like to maybe share your brief profile to the audience?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anise, and I'm from TransUnion, Asia Pacific. So I'm leading the HR functions of TransUnion. I'm based out of Hong Kong. And I think, I've actually joined TransUnion for 8 years, and also seeing kind of how our company is actually transforming the business as well. So our business is mainly like a data technology company, and this topic, I think, talking about Gen Z, I think is actually very interesting, and I thank you for Eddie in sharing the findings, and look forward to sharing and discussing this topic in the coming time. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. We'll go to you with more expert analysis a bit later. Next, we have Ariel Wu, who's the regional head of people for Allianz APAC. Ariel, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi everyone. This is Ariel Wu. I'm the regional head of People COE for Allianz Asia Pacific. Under the People COE, I look after talent acquisition, talent management, learning and development, diversity and inclusion, as well as health and engagement. So generational diversity is something that's very close to my heart. And at Allianz, Allianz is a leading insurance and asset management company. We really looked into how do we provide a good employee life cycle management for different employees from the different generation, and I'm very happy to be in today's panel where I can share a little bit on what we're doing, as well as discuss this very important topic with all my fellow panelists.
Thanks, Ariel. Thanks for that introduction. Now, finally, we also have a Gen Z in attendance today, so we'll be listening to a bit from her side of things. Her name is Ada. She's a senior consultant at Hays Hong Kong. Ada, why don't you share your background?
Hi, everyone. This is Ada at Hays Hong Kong. I've joined Hays as a researcher, and I currently has 3 years of compliance recruitment experience across insurance industry. And I just expand my desk to include insurance marketing. So if anyone need help in recruitment, feel free to find me. And I think I'm the only Gen Z in this discussion, and I'm so happy to have this chance to talk about my feeling and from a Gen Z perspective.
Thank you, Ada. While we're on you, why don't we kick off the discussion with you, Ada? So Gen Zs are kind of said to be the workforce of the future. So do you see Gen Zs different? Or do you see your generation different to others?
Well, as a Gen Z, I just don't want to say that we are very special and very different compared to other generations. But yes, I do think there are some differences between us because of the environment we grow up. Compared to the past generation, I think we have more opportunities to be well educated. And we are born in a generation with all the technologies there to require the information to be readily available at our fingertips. So 20 years ago, I think the video conferencing tools are non-existent, and all the workflows are manuals, and companies are not paying attention to commit for their social responsibilities. But thinking about my time at high school and universities, actually, I do have lots of chances and to be aware of the topics related to like gender equality, sustainability, and etc. So I think the information obtained trigger us to have more things to think about and to have more expectations other than just looking for a job. So I think this is the differences I think compared to other generations.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. You know, I'm not too far away from you in terms of a generation, but definitely what you've mentioned and what I've been through, maybe growing up and my personal own expectations is also very different. So it's very good to kind of hear the other side. It'll certainly help me when I lead my Gen Zs. And I think that the next one, I'd like to kind of just talk to Anise about it. Has TransUnion done any, you know, or went out to get different reports or analysis that you've done specifically for your Gen Z employees?
Okay, so thank you for the questions, Adrian. So I think, well, on analysis and report, I think, well, I just want to share that we have actually like kind of in understanding how we work with the Gen Z. I also have a look of an engagement survey that we just did with the company. Within the company, it's actually more so an enterprise-wide engagement survey that we like kind of from the survey, we also dissect our result, our engagement level across like different generations in the company. So I would say that I think it's very interesting to find that in enterprise-wide and TransUnions, or even in Hong Kong, the Gen Z engagement levels come at the top of the three of the like kind of the age segment. So and also reading the result, I think, well, they feel like kind of very engaged when they find the managers like kind of are supportive as well as respectful, and also I think, well, they also respect like kind of that they have the transparencies in the way that they work, and also the flexibility of work as well. So if they feel engaged when their managers are actually supportive with the change, that they have the work-life balance. So I think, well, this is probably some factors that would keep our Gen Z engaged.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, leaders don't always know everything. So I think definitely it's good to respect the values and expectations of our newer generation. And going to you, Eddie, I know that, you know, you shared a lot of reports and findings earlier as well. Is there any specific ones that you know, you feel like you can share more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my end, I do agree with Annie's and the rest of the panelists as well. I think really what I'm hearing and also experiencing is really around engagement at different touch points. I think that's very important. So with Gen Zs being highly engaged when you know, they get the right, you know, developmental opportunities, you know, they get, you know, the opportunities to develop themselves, to take on different, you know, highly challenging tasks as well. You know, but that could probably only happen when there is high engagement between the managers and you know, their, you know, the Gen Z reports or the Gen Z employees as well. So I would say constant touch points will be important from the very start. From recruitment to onboarding all the way across the talent lifecycle will be actually key. And actually the glue that actually binds all these together as well.
And while we're with you, Eddie, going on to kind of a second question, or what do you see from kind of your perspective being in SHL? What do you see organizations, maybe doing to attract, engage, retain Gen Z, or are there kind of different channels that you see businesses doing or using from the past?
Yeah, so perhaps I can share a couple of interesting ones, and the rest could also chime in as well. So something that's been really exciting with our work with clients is really supporting them across, the entire employee life cycle per se. So the idea of having a strong employer branding is actually key when it comes to recruitment and selection of, Gen Z leaders or Gen Z candidates as well. And something that I've been hearing a lot of clients and working a lot with clients is really around the idea of authenticity. So while it is, common practice that we do kind of put out, the best parts of the organizations and attracting talent, but for a lot of the Gen Z candidates and Gen Z high potential, it's also painting a realistic picture as well. So you could probably, for example, we could probably do a great graduate campaign per se, but putting in realistic elements of challenges, of this particular job or this particular problem entails is also a key motivating factor when it comes to attracting these talents as well. So that's the first piece. And the other second piece would then also be around how are we kind of putting off, a story or brand to our candidates or our graduates or even Gen Z leaders per se, that there is a constant perception that we are putting up a fair and inclusive environment within the workplace as well. So, probably these are the 2 points that has came up really strongly, especially with some of the work that we have done with clients. Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie. I know, Anis, that you also have, you and TransUnion actually also have done different projects or channels to engage and recruit, such as bringing interns to work and on ESG and purpose-driven projects. Would you be able to maybe just share with the audience a little bit more on that?
Okay. Yes. So I think, well, as Ada also mentioned, like kind of Gen Z, they look for a purpose. I think, well, now we are seeing like kind of different generations because of like the Gen Z, they are actually more tech savvy. They have like kind of a lot of information and very often I think, well, they want to see a purpose in their work as well. So in TransUnion, we do like kind of join the program that is organized by the Hong Kong Jockey Club as well as the Council of Social Services. And that is actually a program that we hire the fresh graduates. That is actually the first time job seekers for them to like kind of entering into the corporate world and with a purpose. So the program that we signed up is actually Business for Good. So we hire and like kind of fresh graduates, and with her joining us, we have her to like kind of lead some of our ESG programs, some of our programs that we continue to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion for TransUnion. So that I think will give them a sense of like understanding what they are doing, as well as making an impact with the company, as well as continue to build a career as well.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really great to see, sizable, massive businesses like TransUnion, you're really taking a step forward and helping Gen Z find meaningful purpose, even from an internship program. So that's all very exciting. And I think we should go to Ada. As a Gen Z, do you see different channels for you to apply and look for jobs? Like, how did you find out about Hays? Is there from a different channel?
Well, I mean, agree about Eddie's saying that branding actually is quite important because as a recruiter, I have a lot of chances to come across the candidates from different seniorities. And when I came across the people who are Gen Z like me, they always ask about the company first rather than just ask about a package. And so do I. For me, I want to share some of the practices we are doing at Hays. And I'm very impressed that I see our company has created more opportunities for internship. And actually, we just established a Hayes Academy, just like a school. So to let those Gen Z who are not at Hayes, they can have a chance to have a taste of what this recruiter does on a day-to-day basis, and to let them feel what our company values and let them feel about the culture here. And actually, we also assign some of the managers to coach them, or even we are the part of Gen Z leaders to coach them. So I think this kind of engagement enable to avoid the mismatch scenarios. And yeah, and for the Gen Z who are already at Hayes, we have a lot of opportunities to drive and initiate projects and initiatives. For myself, starting from last year, I have more opportunities to drive internal events and competition. And during the process, I have to think about the resources we need, the timeline, the purpose of the activity, how can we engage people at front office to join our activity. And I think all this engagement enable us to build up our confidence. And what's more important is, as a Gen Z leaders, we are also allowed to hire somebody to start leading. So I think these are something that I think is very valuable experience that I'm going through with Hayes.
It seems like we've done a very good job at making sure that you're a future Gen Z leader and staying extremely engaged with us. So I'll make sure that I tell your manager that what you said today. But I can't let you go yet because you're a Gen Z. I also want to I'm sure the audience will want to find out, what are the top 3 priorities for you when you come to look for a future job? Although, you're staying at Hayes, but if you were to look for a future job, what are those 3 priorities?
So to make my answer more objective, actually, I have conducted a survey among my peers at work and university. And I think the top 3 priorities that we are always talking about is about transparency of communication, the career development, just like what Eddie said in the PowerPoint, and also the flexibility. First of all, I think transparency of communication is one of the key priorities that we would consider when we are seeking for employer. Because, growing in a generation that always promote us to express our own thoughts, and we have a lot of channels and opportunities to discuss the topics like related to society, economy, and even politics. And actually, this kind of discussions trigger us to think it would be great if we are able to do the same at work. So employees, just like Gen Z, they start to think about, maybe the open-mindedness and the communication would be a part of the modern workplace culture. And for myself, actually, I would be grateful if I can work in a place that I can share my thoughts and ideas freely and with the people that they are willing to discuss with us. So I can actually tell why some of my friends, they treasure their opportunities working in a startup environment, because they can assume the culture there will be more open-minded and more receptive to the new ideas. And the second one, career development is, of course, very paramount too, because, the society is very competitive, not only at workplace, but also even for the kids who are stepping into kindergarten. Because of the developed environment, we have plenty of options, but it also created a very intense competition among my generation. So we would like to see if the company can provide a platform to allow us to equip ourselves to be more successful and to fulfill our job satisfaction. It would be great if the skills that we learn from the company can connect with the latest hot skills, for example, like digital tools, or even business management. And in return, we would like to see what kind of value that we can add to the company to recognize ourselves. Last but not least, flexibility. I mean, with the rapid changes in technology and business model, we value the flexibility at work. COVID had transformed our way working. There's a lot of digital tools to make our jobs easier and quicker. So actually the level of being digitalized can demonstrate how adaptable of this company. But I mean, it's always a danger to broad categorization of the demographics that we have to be mindful of, because everyone is different. And for some of the universal goals at work will be also a consideration for all groups. For example, like compensation package, which is a very realistic thing, and the job satisfaction and work recognition.
Thanks, Ada. That's very, very interesting kind of notes to share. And I hope that the audiences from different companies have been taking notes to how to best attract and keep Gen Zs. And I think the next thing that's also very important is retention. Now, obviously, by looking at Ada's performance today, she's definitely someone that we need to retain. Ariel, I would like to go to you and see kind of what you and your business have done to retain Gen Z staff.
So I think what we look at is our organization have to be able to provide our employees with something that they can future-proof. So for Gen Z, they are just started out in their career, and I would say that they have another 20, 30 years more to go. And therefore, it's very important that from an organization point of view, we are able to future-proof their career. What this means is we need to be able to give them opportunities where they can learn the future skills, and exactly what Ida has mentioned, right? She is looking for opportunities to be more successful, learn digital skills, business management skill in order for her to fulfill her career satisfaction. So it is very important for us to be able to provide these opportunities, learning opportunities, development opportunities, even mobility opportunities, where they can then learn and equip themselves. So at Allianz, I think I really love my company's purpose, and our purpose is we secure your future, and our employer value proposition is we care for tomorrow. So the word future, the word tomorrow is there in our DNA. So from a company perspective, we have been doing strategic workforce planning. We have been looking at talent segments. We've been trying to understand which talent segment will still be around for the next 3 to 5 years, which are the new talent segments, what are the skill sets that are mapped to them. And based on that, we really come up with very detailed action plans in order to then upskill, reskill our employees. And this is something that I think from a Gen Z's perspective, we do communicate to this a lot as well. So it gives them a level of comfort that this organization is thinking for them, and there's a reason for them to stay beyond just the job that they have today.
Thank you, Ariel. I actually really like that, securing your future, caring for your tomorrow. You know, those things, you know, even if I'm not Gen Z, it really resonates with me. I actually want to just go a little deeper into what you just said, because you mentioned a lot of things that your organization is doing. Would you be able to give maybe 1 or 2, you know, very specific examples for the audience?
In terms of our strategic workforce planning?
Yes.
So we have done very detailed analysis that includes interviewing businesses, as well as collating external research on various talent segments. I think together we've identified over almost 100 talent segments that we currently have within the organization. And one by one, business by business, we review them, and then we speak with the business to look through all the skills that has been mapped to the talent segment. It has got soft skill, leadership skill, digital skill, technical skill, and to look in the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, each of these skills, at what advanced level and what degree of expertise we will need for each of them. And based on that, we also then do a review of our existing employees, where they are, and what is the gap from our ideal talent segment skills that we've met. And then currently, I mean, this exercise has happened for the last 1.5 years. Currently, we are at the point in time where we're looking at actions. So what are the training actions that needs to take place, any certification, upskilling, as well as we also look at acquisition. What are the gaps? Do we have enough people to fill that? And if not, what are the types of people we need to fill in? And also then we revamp all our job descriptions.
Thank you very much for that. That was very, very in-depth. And I'm sure that, you know, the audience would have picked up on some tricks of the trade. Going to Eddie, obviously from your position, you know, from more of a consulting approach, how would you answer that question on retention with maybe not, you know, obviously Gen Z is big, but maybe, you know, maybe you can even share a little bit more on the Great Resignation and topics like that on how businesses are combating retention, because I'm sure it's a topic that's forefront to all HR professionals or line managers even.
Absolutely. I think especially to Ariel's point as well, and some of the insights that I shared earlier on as well, I think the idea around creating, as what Ariel mentioned, future-proofing your future employees is something that's been coming up more and more important, especially in a time of uncertainty and ambiguity like now, for example, where things around job stability, things around, you know, not being able to, compared to the past, you probably, you know, could be staying in the job for a long period of time. So that kind of perception has changed over time as well. So rather than, you know, gunning for factors around like pay or even you know, stability-wise, we are looking at how do we constantly equip not just Gen Z, but all employees. How do they kind of better themselves and make themselves more future-proof for what's going to come in the future? I'm just going to bring up a point as well. The conception that a lot of Gen Zs or the younger generation, they look out for financial rewards. You know, if there's a higher, somewhere have a higher pay, then I'll probably go there. So, but actually with some of the research and conversations with clients, actually, you know, financial rewards or financial kind of incentive doesn't come up as strong as a priority compared to other things around self-development and personal growth opportunities as well. So it is a priority, but it doesn't take precedence compared to some of these, you know, future-proofing competencies as well. And what this means is, you know, right, in this case, what this means is then the idea that how do I, you know, kind of ensure that my skills still stay relevant 5 years down the road, and the investment that goes into that coming from organizational perspective is actually more important than, you know, probably giving you a slightly higher pay just to retain you as an employee per se. So those are just some interesting conversations that I felt was, you know, exciting as well to share.
Yeah, I actually want to chime in on that a little bit. I do manage close to 20 people, and I think half of them are Gen Z. And I think, you know, communicating and engaging them is so different. And I think it's more almost have to be friends in a way and kind of communicate with them from their style. So that's just a bit from my own personal experiences. And also to put and delegate work, put them into leadership positions that they feel empowered to maybe drive certain parts of business for me. And which kind of dives into that next question, which I would like to speak to Anise about, which is leadership within Gen Z. And because, you know, obviously you've been in TransUnion for a long time and been in the industry for a long time, what have you done or what have you seen that your business is doing differently, specifically to build leaders for Gen Zs that potentially have been different to Gen Y or millennials?
Okay, yeah. So I think, well, when we are talking about Gen Z, as we just share, like kind of, I think, well, they have just entered into the corporate world, into like kind of is the starting the career. So that probably they have 4 years of experience. I think instead of like kind of really a leadership role in a corporate, in an organization, I think it's important to look for opportunities for them so that they could lead on projects or lead on like kind of committees or lead on like kind of tie them with their work with what the visions or the different like kind of that the strategy of your company. So it may be like kind of small projects or for our company, we do have like kind of diversity, equity and inclusion, as I just mentioned, is actually like kind of at the forefront of the company. So we do have like kind of network resources group that we continue to promote different like our associates that work together. So with that, we have our Gen Z and also like kind of the new workforce that they could lead into different like projects. So the network resources group is one, and that they could actually participate in there and organizing engagement activities for our community as well as for our associate. So in TransUnion globally, we also have a tune-up NRG. So that tune-up NRG is really to foster a diverse and inclusive environment, to establish a foundation network for our people, to build upon the relations that our colleagues that they are at their early career that they feel supported.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important that the Gen Zs feel supported at a young and early age. I think our business, we've also done town halls and presentations and asking them to maybe lead CSR projects. So I totally and completely understand where you're coming from with that. The next question, I'm going to go back to Ada. And the question is, how do generations prior to Gen Z, so like millennials, Gen Y, work towards adapting and working well with you? Because I'm certain that I mentioned briefly that I had to work differently, but what do you see from your perspective? Maybe your managers or your seniors working differently to you?
So I'm not so sure if I'm the right person to talk about this, because I can only share the thought from a Gen Z perspective or actually from myself. So actually, when I'm talking about this topic with some of the managers at Hays and also some of my clients from different companies, I found some of the interesting points from them. So for the other generations, they always think that Gen Z, they're impatient, they're very sensitive, and they're easily giving up when they encounter some difficulties, and they can't bear any stress. But for some of this Gen Z, my friends, they just think that, oh, the other generations, they're too distant, they're too conservative, they can't take our ideas. So I think to collaborate together more effectively, we must find a common ground. So one has to be very open-minded, and the other one has to be understand the differences between us and respect our thoughts. So I think customized, personalized feedback session is the most effective way and fastest way to let both sides to reflect what can we do better. So yeah, I actually have a lot of catch-up sessions with my managers, and like every day we talk. So that's what I think we can work better with this kind of communication.
Great, that's great to hear. And that was the Gen Z side of it. Now let's go to Ariel. You're a leader of people. So based on that, what do you see your business perhaps having generations prior to get the best out of Gen Z, or even your own personal experience? And what are some of the best practices that you feel you may have employed to get the best out of your Gen Z employees?
Yes, so I'm a Gen Y. So I think the very first thing that we do is we should avoid stereotyping generations. And it's always very important that what we do run unconscious bias trainings as well, because we know everybody has unconscious biasness. And this is something to recognize and to understand that, so that we can then work towards a work environment that is inclusive and harmonious. So there's a lot of things that non-Gen Z could do. For example, adapting to working and leading in a hybrid environment. The COVID-19 situation has definitely helped many employees like us to adapt to working from home and a hybrid environment. But I'm from Singapore, and I can share that, when the government says everybody come to office, a lot of organizations say, yes, come back to office. and so you think that things have changed? Yes, some have, but many have not. And this is something that, and that this is not aligned to what the Gen Z would like to. Presentism is also something that, it's for the non-Gen Zs, they like to see you being present there. You are not there, you means you're not doing your work. And this is something that a non-Gen Z would need to kind of adapt to this kind of new ways of working. So like Ada said, really have to be open-minded and really will be willing to try out different techniques in order to see what works best. And I recently heard something very interesting as well. It's not about not understanding Gen Z, because the Gen Z's parents are actually the Gen X. So the Gen X were the people who created the Gen Z and taught them how, and make them what they are today. They gave them their cultures, their values, and they are the parents. And how do parents understand their kids? And how do they communicate with their kids? And it's actually, you could actually also get a lot of wisdoms from speaking with Gen X to actually understand Gen Z.
That's a very, very interesting perspective. And I'm 100% going to make sure that I take note of that. Speaking to Gen X to understand Gen Z, definitely on my bucket list. But before I go into the next question with Anise, I just want to share to the crowd again. Feel free to input your questions. I already see that there are a number of very interesting questions, so don't be shy. Remember to put them in the Q&A. If you want to direct them to a specific person, feel free to do so as well. We'll have time. We should have time for that. So Anise, obviously there's some personal stories that's just shared by Ariel. Would you like to share some of maybe your own, when you have supported your young employees and how you've allowed them to become the best version of themselves?
Okay, so I think it's more on giving them the opportunity. So in like kind of as they are just like kind of new to the career, I think on hearing about them, and also like giving them the opportunity so that they can explore different ways. As I just mentioned, like kind of that they want to like kind of, apart from work, I think there are actually like Ada said, like money may be a motivator, but there are actually all other aspects that they are looking for: growth, opportunity, a purpose tied with their work. So if we create an environment for them on projects, on like kind of the day-to-day work, on also like how they work together with the teams, with the opportunity that could enrich their experience, I think that is actually important to them in providing them an experience that they value and that they could continue to grow themselves.
Thank you. Thanks, Anise. And Eddie, do you want to add a bit onto that?
Yeah, so I think from a personal experience, as well as speaking with other clients as well who are on board with us, I think the idea around really supporting, regardless if you're having interns or graduates or, Gen Z reports working with you as well, I think the common idea is really around communication and, self-awareness as well. So self-awareness, not just at a Gen Z level, but also, as Zero mentions, across the different stakeholders, across the different generations as well. So the challenge then, I think, as a manager or as someone who could be a leader would be then, how do you translate and take into account all these different perceptions and all these different opinions and communicate to your Gen Z in a way that is effective, that is still aligning to the expectations as well. Because as we know, when it comes to things around change management, self-awareness and communication is the key. You see, it's not about how much data points you have. It's not about how established your program is, but really around the communication and stakeholder management is important as well. So I just want to add on to Ariel and Annie's around that. But it's important to really be on the ball and to be to have that high touch point.
Yeah, I think touch point definitely is very important. I have to be honest, I take my Gen Z colleagues and team members out to Friday lunches all the time, casual drinks and things like that, just to bond and continue to build and foster a closer relationship. And this kind of brings us onto the next point, which is maybe challenges when communicating with Gen Z. Just personally, I think, again, I could be completely off base here and it could be very personal, but sometimes I find when I speak to my own Gen Zs in my own team that they are perhaps a little bit more conservative, a little bit more in terms of the mindset, have a little bit more excuses and challenges and a bit more negative. Not in a way, but it's just not in a negative way, but more in a way that they're just conservative and more realistic about things. Whereas I think generations prior would have a mindset of let's just kind of go do it. That's some personal challenges that I have. Again, very subjective, very opinionated. But I would be interested to hear, Ariel, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges you have when you communicate with Gen Z, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, so I think communication can come in various ways, right? Just telling you to do A, B, C, D is communicating. Or the other way, because Gen Z really buys into purpose and really wanting to understand, why am I doing this? What is the objective? And therefore, when we communicate with Gen Z, storytelling is something that is very important. As leaders of Gen Z, I think it's important that we know how to articulate what is the purpose, what is the strategy, what am I doing, what are you doing that is contributing to the bigger picture, and to be able to articulate it well enough so that the Gen Z generation accepts it and they can see where they fit into the company's strategy. I think this is something that is very important, because if they don't see that purpose, if you can't communicate and tell them this bigger picture, they wouldn't feel aligned, they wouldn't feel the passion, and they wouldn't want to contribute more, and they may just find something else. So I think it is all about packaging the way you talk to them and to get the message across. So without my organization, this is one of those skill sets. As like I talk about strategic workforce planning, future skills is not even a future skill now. It is a current, present skill that all managers and leaders would need to upskill themselves in, which is really storytelling, in order for them to be able to talk about and communicate better with the Gen Z. And another thing about challenges or not is timely feedback. And I think Ada also mentioned this as well. Again, I think many, maybe not, and timely feedback is actually 101 manager skills anyway, but it is not actually practiced a lot. And it's important to a Gen Z because they want to have the timely feedback, just because they've grown up in a digital world where people just message and get this kind of feedback. Or, I want to know this answer. They just need to Google and then they get the answer. So it's already in them. And if they did something and then you tell them 3 months later, only during mid-year review, it is way too late. And then they feel that why isn't there why aren't we communicating? And so this is something that communicate. We need to look into communication, and then that equates to building trust, which is all in all the essence of how we want a company to be harmonious and inclusive. Really good communication will then lead to really a trustful organization.
Yeah, completely agree with the timely feedback and being 3 months later, if there's an issue and you discuss it 3 months later, 3 months later is probably a bit too late. But I'm going to put you on the spot because from your opinion, obviously you're a manager of people. What is an approximate time frame for timely feedback? Again, very subjective, but I'm sure the crowd and I myself is interested to understand from your perspective.
So a timely feedback could be, it really depends. So I have teammates who would go into a presentation and then almost immediately we just schedule a short one. A feedback does not have to be long. It could be a good job, or rather we wouldn't say good job, but as a manager, we will always ask, how do you feel? How do you think it went? Again, 101. And then based on that, then you provide my observation on that. If something is not going, we have a timeline and it is not met, then again, it has to be brought up. And having very regular catch up. So I do have weekly Joe Fix with my direct team members. And sometimes the longest, is 1 week. And depends also because some of these feedback, it is better to be given face to face than through a message, because the tone, the way you write a message may be different. So it really depends on what I feel would be the most effective channel. If it has to be a face-to-face, then we see it's how urgent or not. And if I'm going to just meet my direct reports next Monday, then I'll just wait for next Monday. But if something that is super urgent, then we agree, should we have a Zoom call? Should we have a quick call? And then provide the feedback. So it really varies.
No, thank you for that. Sometimes I also have this issue of there's something I want to talk about, but I'm like, is now really the right time, or should I maybe delay a couple days, or get it out now? So it's definitely playing on my mind, which is why I asked that question and put you on the spot. But thank you very much for being a champion and answering that. And I'm going to go with Anise next. The question really is, obviously, being a HR leader, you have a role to play to influence the next generation, to nurture and to help the next generation. What do you see personally as your role being at the top of the pyramid, and how to bring change to your juniors, and also maybe to even juniors in other business units as a HR professional?
Okay, thank you for the question, Adrian. So I think, HR or really take a critical role in promoting the work culture, right? When we are actually talking about workforce generation, this is always a big topic. I think probably 10 years ago, we were talking about, millennials, they are coming into the workforce, right? Now that we are talking about Gen Z. So understanding different generation and how different generation work together, that is important. And for the role of HR is really bridging the gaps of different generation in the workplace. And also every workforce, they have a role to play, as well as different people, they are also going through different stages of life. And so that is why diversity and inclusion is that important, right? We have to respect people. We want to promote an environment that everybody could actually perform to their best and also come to work and be authentic about themselves. So be what generation, Gen X, Gen Y, or now the new workforce, I think it is important for us as an HR to continue to promote that culture that people could embrace diversity and inclusion, so that it's more about mutual respect and also understanding where other focus is, how we could actually support each other and how we could actually like kind of provide a meaningful experience to everyone, particularly to the Gen Z. I think when I was actually talking to the Gen Z in my office, I think they like challenge. They likes to work on projects, but also sometimes they want to have the support and the mentor from the managers as well. So as they want to be like kind of leading projects, sometimes they are still like kind of with the experience. They want to have more mentor, more coaching. They don't know what they don't know. So when I talked to them, they said, okay, well, if I am given the projects, then I would expect regular checkpoint, how I could actually do it better. And I think it's important for us as HR to bridge the gap and to make sure like our managers understand, as Ariel also just mentioned, like constant feedback, like regular checks in, to make sure that they feel supported. That is important.
Thank you. Ariel, I'm sure, you know, being a HR leader, you must have done some things very similar. But I also want to hear if you have done anything different. So maybe you could share similarities and differences. That would be great.
I definitely agree with Anis. I think, like she said, we are the bridge, we are the connector, we are the translator, we are the many things that help to glue the organization together as HR. And I come into HR, and I believe many people on this call, as well as you, Adrian, and Anis, we come into HR because we love people, we love connecting people, and we also probably also I understand a little bit of human psychology in order to make things make them work and make things tick. So really, as HR, our role is to understand all this, keep our eyes open, talk to as many people as we can, draw the balance, draw the parallel in order to connect it into something that is viable for an organization to thrive, so that everybody, you know, can learn and grow together. It's not about creating an organization just benefiting the Gen Z or just benefiting the Gen Y or Gen X. It has to have a balance within the organization. So if for us, we do look at personas as well. So do not assume that all Gen Z, again, like stereotyping, but different employees are also at different employee life cycle. There will be people who are just starting their career, maybe Gen Z. There will also be Gen Z-ish who are also, I don't know, work parents. They might be a young family as well. And then they have very similar needs and wants with somebody in their 30s, mid-30s, who's also a parent or an older parent, right? And then there will be people who would then have their kids grown up, and then they have the time and energy to restart their career again and passion again. And then there will also be people who are moving off to a different role and function. So we look at different personas apart from just generation in order to kind of bridge everything together.
I would like to add another point as well, Adrian. So writing on Ariel, just what mentioned, I think it's also like kind of bridging the gaps. It's also important for the leaders to understand and be open-minded on working into the Gen Z, right? I think leaders sometimes have to be vulnerable to understand that, well, the world has changed, particularly after pandemic, right? It's completely a new world. The working style, and also like as Eddie mentioned, they have gone through this critical like pandemic situations. I think it's completely, there is a lot of things that have changed. People expect more flexibility and hybrid working. So I think it's be authentic and listen to them, and so it's and the leaders have also have to be like kind of vulnerable and admit that sometimes there may be like insight and ideas that they can take from the Gen Z generation as well.
Actually, that brings up a story that I can actually share with the audience. This was probably a year or 2 years ago, about listening to feedback, leaders admitting that they may not know everything. I actually had a team meeting at that time. I had only maybe 8 or 9 people. We were close, but we weren't performing as well as we should. I actually went into a meeting room. I had all 8 or 9 of them sit in front of me and tell me what I was doing wrong, what they didn't like about me, and what I needed to change. That session actually was very meaningful to me, and I actually learned a lot from that in terms of management. Luckily, we haven't had to go through one of those again, because now I have 20 people, and I don't know how I would feel if I have 20 people telling me that I'm terrible. So, but yeah, that was a very interesting story, and 100%, I could not agree more on taking feedback as a leader. And finally, I see that there are 9 questions from our audience, so that's very, very good. Keep them coming. We will get through to them at the very end. We have one last question that's prepared, and I'm going to bring in both Eddie, Ariel, and Anise to chime in on this, because I think most of the audience would be very interested in understanding this question. So what are some of the emerging skills and competencies that you think would be key to future-proof the next generation of leaders? Eddie, you want to go first? You look like you want to go first.
Oh no, so I think, yeah, also going back to some of the pointers I shared earlier on, really is what we are seeing is really around the ability to navigate ambiguity as well. And this is something that has came up a lot more pronounced over the years as well, especially as you're moving towards a more uncertain and volatile business environment. But I think what's more important around that is being able to manage, your stress levels and to cope with pressures as well. So that's something that comes hand in hand, just going back to one of the earlier insights that I've shared. So it could be the case where we could be volunteering for opportunities, volunteering for new projects to do, but at the same time, also taking that guided approach to say, when am I at my limit? I think that's very important as a future competency, as a Gen Z as well, because a lot of times we might not know when it's a limit. And I think with, the idea around mental health, mental wellness coming up as something being more prevalent in this time and age, the ability to kind of manage your own emotions, managing your own stress levels, particularly important. So that's the first one. And the second one would probably be around being able to continuously, generate some of this, ideate and think about different workarounds to situations that might not be as clear cut. So we might not have the luxury of having SOPs for every single thing, but how do we kind of manage those pieces of information, make sense of it, and to relate back to a wider business outcome. So there's probably 2 kind of quick outcomes I'm sharing, but happy to hear from the rest as well, Ariel and Anise.
So thanks, Eddie. I totally agree with you. The part on learning how to deal with stress and anxiety, and because this is some mental health wellness is something that is top of mind for every employee and every HR practitioner now, especially in the COVID time. But I think on top of that, because the speed of change is just getting faster and faster. So one of the things that we need to train up the next generations of leaders is really improving their learning agility, and also to be able to navigate in ambiguity. Because I think from your research, you've also shown that they have been a little bit more cautious now, and with the speed over perfection as well as agility, because the environment's going to get faster and faster. So they need to be able to improve that piece. On top of that, I think building trust and relationship is also something that is very important. I would say again, with the generation, everything comes in so fast, but building trust and relationship takes time. So whether they need to be able to understand what is a lasting relationship, how do we go about interacting with people, and that is something I would say, it's not that they don't know how to interact, but it is something deeper than that. And psychological safety will be the last one, I would say. There will be times that they will fail, but understanding and providing the environment for them it's all right to fail and learn from failure is something that I think it's also important to future-proof them, to make them more resilient as well.
Yeah, so I agree, like kind of Eddie and Ariel. So with the so fast changing world, I think agility is really important, like kind of really like cope with different business environment, right? Different business priorities. Because even like kind of different times, if you have like kind of, well, in TransUnion, we work with a 3-year plan. So I think a lot of company, they do have like kind of strategic plan set, right? But with the business change and also like kind of sometimes you have to like be able to shift gears into adjusting into different priorities. But I think fundamentally that if they will be able to multitask with understanding what the fundamental purpose of the company, that is important. So tying with what we go through, we mentioned like a couple of times in how do we have them to see the purpose at work, right? TransUnion being like a data technology company, we are doing a lot in like kind of shaping the industry, particularly after pandemic, into a lot of the digital transformation. So it's also like kind of when we are engaging the new generations for them to understand how they are making the impact in the world, in the business world, and in the company, like strategy is important. So with that, they even like kind of the competencies that we expect them to be able to multitask or be agile enough into shifting into different like kind of business priorities. I think fundamentally they see the reason why they are doing this. So it's important like kind of for them to see what the company strategy and direction is.
Thank you very much, Anise. Thank you. Those are our prepared questions. There are so far, I think, 9 questions from the audience. I'm sure that our panelists can click on the Q&A box to take a look at them. Actually, there are 10 now. Some questions are directed to an individual. Some questions, by the look of it, I can tell it's directed also to an individual, but otherwise I will ask the question and feel free to kind of just go ahead if you have an answer. If not, I can also kind of pinpoint where the direction is going, okay? So the first question is actually going to go to Eddie. Would you be able to share what some of your clients have done to balance giving new Gen Z leaders space, but within structure and process of company?
Okay, great. So maybe I'll just share a quick example. I think the first thing to this would probably, working for stakeholders to kind of develop, a graduate training program, which that itself is a structured program that kind of enables them to enable your Gen Z leaders or employees to go through a structured process of learning and feedback that's been designed, especially for the particular case. But other examples will also be around giving these Gen Z leaders a lot more clarity in terms of what the end goal is. So rather than, putting them on a big project and telling them just do A and B, but helping them understand what is the overall vision. So what is A plus B is C? So what is the overall vision that comes with it, and working backwards with your Gen Z to kind of determine the steps it's needed to get there. So, and from there, then as a Gen Z leader, they could probably take some of these pieces and steps on their own or with the other Gen Z leaders as well to collectively reach, an endpoint or the business success. And a good idea around that is with a lot of leadership development programs that we're doing and talent management programs is the idea of really putting in some of this what we call action learning projects in place as well, whereby, this could be reframed as a challenge, this could be reframed as a stretch goal for these Gen Z leaders as well to kind of achieve a business goal. But, throughout this entire process is to provide timely check-ins to check with them, this is a stretch goal, this is a stretch assignment. So every week, for example, spending, I would say, a pulse check, 15, 20 minutes to get in touch with them around what are the challenges that they're facing, and to rather take a more advisory role rather than telling them, you're wrong, you have to do A and B, rather telling them, you have to do A and B because you're going to get to C. So some of these, leadership development programs have some of these elements involved in it, kind of these action learning plans involved in it, and then we would see how they would perform at the end of, some of these stretch goals or action learning projects. So that's probably an example I would share. What a lot of companies are also doing, especially the ones that we work with when it comes to developing leaders in a more structured and autonomous manner. Yeah.
Thank you, Eddie. Not an easy question to answer, but thank you, Eddie. The next one, I'm actually going to go to Ada, because I think this one's actually directed at something you said during the panel discussion. Someone asked, what do you mean by reverse mentoring? So obviously I know what that is because we work in the same company, but would you be able to share maybe first of all, the definition of reverse mentoring? So share with the audience what it means from our Hays context, and also share maybe what was discussed and how do you feel about it?
I will just share an example that I'm having some managership, the managership that I have at Hays. Actually, from last year, we did have started running a Big Brother and Sister programs, and I'm one of the mentee. The reason why I'm talking about that, we always want some timely mentoring and timely feedback session is about that we have obtained a lot of information, and actually we don't know what kind of information is correct and what kind of decisions we have to make. So that's why I want, or as a Gen Z, some of my friends, they want some reverse mentoring. And for example, like the program that I just mentioned, the Big Brother and Sister program, my mentor actually just always, like per month, dating me for a casual catch-up, and we will talk about some of the scenarios we have at work, and I will share some of the difficulties that I'm encountered at work, and he would just share with me some of the solutions that he would prefer. And actually this helped me to improve my problem-solving skills, and I think that's what I mean for the reverse mentoring. Yeah.
Thank you, Ada. And just to maybe add more onto that, personally, I'm not a Gen Z, but I can share also a bit more on the mentorship program from the other side, because at Hays we do it for a certain level of seniority. For example, I'm a senior manager at Hays, but I would reverse mentor my Asia MD. So for example, my Asia MD being Richard Early, he would actually be my mentee and ask me what we can change as a business from my perspective, which is more operational, more day-to-day, more going out to win business and understanding the market touch points. Because sometimes being in his role, he runs 6 countries, 13 offices, and over 1,000 people. He doesn't get on the phone or speak to clients anymore. So he loses that touch point. So he comes to us as a more reverse mentorship program to understand business leads and how he can kind of continue to strategize and how to structure the business moving forward. So that I hope that gives also a little bit more of a different and comprehensive answer to the audience. And then
one more point to add. Just what I mentioned is that we are also, as a Gen Z leaders, we are also allowed to recruit some subordinates under us to start leading. And actually, this kind of experience can help us to learn about ourselves too. Because while we are like coaching someone, or instead of just listening to our managers, we can find out, oh, actually the managers are saying something correct. I have the problem, so I have to fix it. So yeah, That's the point I want to add. Oh, Adrian, you're muted.
Sorry, I said don't go away, Ada. This next question is still for you, because the next question is from, it's unlike big companies with a very systematic platform and comprehensive career development path, it's easy for those companies to hire Gen Z talent. For example, Allianz, SHL, TransUnion, you know, their name, a lot of people's heard of them. But you being a recruiter, and I can support you with that answer as well, is that, you know, maybe sometimes you work for companies that are not so big. I know you do insurance, for example. Some you do AIA, Prudential. Some it could be very small clients. So how do you think those smaller companies can attract Gen Z talent?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that it doesn't mean it doesn't, we don't care actually the size of the company. Of course, the branding is very important, but just like I mentioned, some of my friends, they actually value to work in smaller companies or startup companies because of the culture. So I think for the small companies, we have to be very aware to share with the candidate is about what do you think about the management of the company and what kind of strategies that you're going to deliver in the upcoming 1 to 2 years, what kind of exposure that you can offer to the candidates, to Gen Z people, because just like the normal, not only Gen Z, but for all the candidates, they for those who are working in the big companies, they have a very structured layers. If they joining the company, maybe they have a very specialized area to focus. But for the small companies, of course, we can share that what kind of exposure or what kind of project that you might be able to take part in. So I think it's not only about the size of the company, it's more about how to share the benefit, how to share the culture of the company to the Gen Z candidate. And I do think they would accept that. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the listeners and the audience, personally, I deal with a lot of smaller businesses, and my strategy is really to work closer with the business for them to build a more sincere approach. For example, asking my line managers to drop a thank you note to the candidate if they've done well, or ask the line manager to perhaps take them for a coffee to build rapport and build relationship. Because a lot of times, yes, you work for the business, but you also work for your line manager. So those are some of the things that I've advised smaller clients to do when you may not have the quite the platform of maybe some other businesses that are behemoth organizations. Next question from the audience was, what is the gap of difference between Gen Z and Millennials? I think that's Gen Z and Gen Y, and how to address the difference. I can tell you that Gen Y and Millennials is between 1981 to 1996. And Gen Z is 1995 to 2012. So some of them would actually still be in school for Gen Z, and we're preparing for that future. Eddie, do you want to maybe talk about and address the differences you see?
So I'm not sure if I'm getting the question correct. So I think definitely when we ran some of our analysis, you know, to compare between, for example, millennials and Gen Z, we do see certain significant differences, you know, for example, in terms of personality or in terms of certain competencies as well. So maybe I'll put forth maybe just a more targeted example. So in the event that we do have a Gen Z direct report as well as a millennial manager, so using that as an example, so, you know, certain things that we have worked with clients on would then be probably the self-awareness part. So if you are doing some form of self-awareness exercise, maybe a 360-degree feedback, or maybe even a strengths-based, a personality-based testing tool that we do at SHL as well. So using that as a sort of a leverage when it comes to having that first conversations or as part of onboarding between the millennial manager as well as the Gen Z report as well, to understand the differences. And I can tell maybe generically across some of the trends that we see, we do see, for example, millennials being a little bit more open, when it comes to sharing their experiences. They don't, they're willing to share, their at home or their personal lives at the workplace a lot more than Gen Zs. And if you're not aware of that, then probably that could be an area of concern, especially with a millennial manager and a Gen Z report, for example. Or it could be the case around maybe around solving problems as well. That's also something, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there seem to be different thinking approaches when it comes to solving different issues between a leader, a Gen X leader, a millennial leader compared to a Gen Z high potential per se. So really, to have that evidence and to have the data to support, that conversation that you're going to have between the millennial and the Gen Z would be the key to go. And even at SHL, we also do advocate around going into some of these conversations with some data or evidence and having that first initial conversation. And I think, how do we manage the differences, between a millennial or a Gen Z? Then they'll really depend on the intervention you're taking as well, and probably some of the things that Ariel and as well as Ada has mentioned as well. So a good thing would be using some evidence-based approach and using that as a conversation starter to understand the difference.
Thank you, Eddie. We have, I think, 8 or 9 minutes left to go through 4 or 5 questions. I'm trying to get through all of them, so please, panelists, be first thing that comes out of your mind. So one of the problems that we frequently encounter is that Gen Z do not know how to address issues without the fear of retaliation, especially in a highly traditional and closely knitted and tight management environment. And even the HR department seems to be under constant peer pressure. And this always ends with them leaving the company. So what are some ways that, from an HR perspective, you think can convince and change the mindset and company culture amongst top management? Anise, do you want to start us off? I see that you've prepared for this while I was speaking.
Okay, yeah, so I will give us a try. So, well, I think it's also like kind of as an HR, how do you promote the culture? As Gen Z, they want to like kind of be transparent and they appreciate feedback. So it's also our role to kind of also like let the managers, the Gen X, the Gen Y, to understand like kind of this is actually important in managing the new workforce that is coming. And they are actually, the populations of that will be growing in the next few years as well. So it's important like kind of to hear from them, to provide like kind of a safe space for them to speak up. And that is also why like kind of regular check-ins then is important. So and even the leaders have to be vulnerable, like kind of welcome feedback, listen to them. And well, in TransUnion, we do also have like kind of a speed up portal as well. So we like kind of also promote that transparencies, but if we have associates that they don't feel comfortable of it, I think always they could come to HR. If the managers like kind of they have like kind of different tensions working with the managers, I think HR has to be the one to be very welcoming of them, to hear out from them. Or otherwise, in TransUnion, we do have a speed up portal where we allow our associates that they can make anonymous like feedback or even like complaints, and it's actually a hotline that we operate, and we keep them completely confidential. But again, I think we don't want like things to be escalated to that level, because even our leaders, and I remember one of our presidents that he said that we don't need like kind of Dropbox, we don't need speed up. We want everybody be comfortable to just come to my office, and that's like kind of the Dropbox. So that's the culture I think that we have to encourage and continuous to let the managers understand that as well.
If I could add as well, thanks, Anise. I think engagement survey and pulse checks, anonymous, would also be something that is good, because I think from a top management perspective, data-driven evidence is always something that would support why they need to change or what the employees are asking for. So having these elements in place will be a very good tool for HR to use when they have conversation with top management. And of course, I think from a HR perspective, we need to go with proposed solution. We can't just say this is the problem and then leave it as it is. We would go with proposed solution and say you could do this. I suggest we try this, and then slowly. I don't think culture doesn't change overnight, but as long as we can shift the needle and we can track that and we can see that improvement, I think that will be very valuable.
Yes, very true, Ariel. I think, well, tied with that engagement, I always think that like kind of engagement survey that we did, the result is actually a good indication, but that is actually a numbers. So what I am actually talking to the managers is that you have to understand the story behind the numbers, right? If you have a high engagement score, that is good. You have to celebrate. If you have a low engagement score, talk to your people, right? Why they are actually putting that score in. And then I think have to be very like kind of open mind to receive feedback, as Ada mentioned, like kind of reverse, like kind of listen to them and finding out what are the things that we have to address and really work on an action plan. Because if we don't add on engagement survey, don't add on the feedback, I think, well, they would not provide feedback anymore.
Yes. Agree.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Very interesting perspectives and great answer to the question. There is actually a very, very interesting question that's been asked in the Q&A. And I would probably like to bring all four opinions on this. So the question is, it's very interesting to hear so much great advice on how managers and organizations need to adapt to attract and retain Gen Z talent. In higher ed, we're often looking at the flip side of this issue. How do Gen Z need to learn and adapt to meet the demands of the working world? Ultimately, the generations will have to work alongside one another. Are there ways in which the panelists feel Gen Z need to adapt to the older generations and also to the Gen A or Alpha that will ultimately come after them? Adaptation has always has to be a two-way street. I think this is a great question because it flips it to the other end. Shall we start off with Eddie?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea that we need to adapt with each other, I think is absolutely important. And again, going back to the idea of developing or Gen Z leaders not being a one-way street, I think it's more around how do we manage some of these intergenerational changes that have that have changed over time as well. So definitely there are other ways, when it comes to engaging our Gen Z, which I think have been mentioned by a lot of panelists as well. But also, I would say, going back to the main point around to just initiate and to start those conversations would be a fantastic way to start understanding each other, because a lot of times, especially with organizations that they work with, we haven't done enough research. We haven't done enough understanding of different levels of different, Gen Zs, millennials, and across different teams as well. It's not just for generations, but team cultures and organizational culture comes into play as well. So I would say the most important factor, and I think the rest of the panelists could chime in after that, would definitely be self-awareness. Just initiate the conversations, like something like what we're doing now. We have different people of different demographics coming together to just have that first conversation would be a fantastic, great start.
Ariel, would you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let me chime in as well. I think adapting to every generation, it's always there. So no matter now it's Gen Z and then later it's Gen Alpha, and so on and so forth. And even previously when I come into the workforce as a then Gen Y and then adapting to the baby boomers and Gen X, it is something that is ongoing and it will not change. I think from a Gen Z perspective, it's really understanding that every generation brings along their the ways they work that they're used to, but most importantly is the experience that they bring along with them. So today we kept talking about being open-minded. Gen Z asking the other older generations to be open-minded, but at the same time, Gen Z also needs to be open-minded when it comes to accepting some of the things. It's the way it is, or this has been the culture. We are here with bring in new perspective, but it does take time to change. And so they may be impatient, but how do we manage that as well? So this would, like I say, it will continue, because understanding each generation and not stereotyping each generation is something that we need to work towards.
Yeah, so I can add to that, for them to meet the demands of the working world, right? Like kind of be it like kind of big organization or startup, I think the company, they do like kind of have the directions that they want to go through. If it is important for the Gen Z to understand that as well. So in fact, like goal setting is important. So as I think, well, if they could actually be aligned on the mission of the company and also the strategy and understanding like the directions of it, then they will be more ready to contribute and to adjust into the demands of the working world. So it's like kind of, as they are also the generation that they are highly like kind of flexible. They have a lot of like kind of information. They can easily access to different information. So we should actually leverage them as well into like kind of how that we could adjust into the demand, or how do we leverage their insight as well as their ideas in bringing into achieve the goals of the company.
And Ada?
So as a Gen Z, I want to answer the part of how do Gen Z need to learn and adapt to meet the demands of the working world. I mean, we're not born to be different. I think the thing to make ourselves a little bit, there's a lot of differences between us and the other generation is that because of the environment we grow up. Because I guess no one's, or even Gen X, Gen Y, they don't expect that we're going through COVID now. So the situations and the things that surrounding us make us kind of shape our personality to be a bit more unsecure. So what's my advice, or the advice also to myself, is that to be more confident, like before, to have a goal setting. I think most of us are just starting our career, and some of them are stepping into the leadership role. And what my advice is to just be more confident to yourself and volunteer to everything that you can do, because if you don't try, you never know what's the best way for you to work. So I think this is my advice and how to adapt to this new working world.
Thank you very much, Ada. Very interesting sharing from different perspectives from different people. We have got 5 minutes left, so I think we will finish off with one question. This question is actually very close to my heart because it's about well-being and mental well-being. Being a committee member of diversity and inclusion, mental well-being is very important to me and to my staff. So the question is about what about the aspect of well-being and mental well-being coming up a lot amongst Gen Z, and they just want to get the panelists' kind of personal perspective on that. Why don't you start, Ada? You're the Gen Z. Tell us what is the mental well-being things that comes up most for you.
Well, I have to say I used to be easy to get stressed, but because I think more about the nature of the work, because I see myself as a sales, we have a lot of target to meet, and I think different people in different positions, they have their own goals. the way I try to manage my mental health is that I would love to talk a lot. Even my managers, I would keep talking to him and to ask them for advice. And the way they trust me can actually help me to release some stress. And maybe just after work, find something to pursue, like hobbies, go to gym, do whatever you want to manage your mental health. But I know some of the people who are from Hayes, they would just say, oh, you're not going to gym, just pretend. But whatever do to manage your mental health, then it's good to everybody. Yeah.
Maybe just 1 or 2 lines from Eddie, Ariel, and Anise.
I'll quickly start first. Yeah, so I think adding on to Ada as well, I think the idea around mental wellness has shifted over, I would say, the past 5 to 8 years. And I think the way to really go, and I think many organizations are starting to work around that, is to really see mental wellness as a positive thing rather than part of, I don't know, EAP, Employee Assistance Program, where only people who are weak, they go for that, but really to reframe it in a positive light as part of leadership development, as part of employee development. I think there will be a great movement to move ahead as well.
I agree with Eddie, because now I think we hear the phrase it's okay not to be okay, and everybody talks and mental health well-being something. It's not just on Gen Z that they need it. Actually, it's for every employee across the different age group. It's just that now it is being more talked about, and that's why that's a higher focus. And when there's a higher focus, some employees find it easier to speak up, and some still find it as a taboo to talk about, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm just not feeling good. So I think from our perspective is really to make it, to build a trustful environment that people are able to talk it out or able to express it, so that, it doesn't become a bigger issue.
Yeah, so I can write on that. I think, how we continue to support each other is important, because the world is changing so fast that the demand from work is so high. So it's continuously, when we are working with Gen Z or any generations, how we work together, listen out to them. I think instead of like me working alone, it's we that working in a group. We just have a mental wellness month. May is actually the International Mental Wellness Month. We just have a seminar. And I remember kind of a quote that was from the speaker. She actually mentions if I, as an illness, if we add it to a we, illness will become wellness. So it's really kind of the team to support each other that is important.
Thank you, NS. So I think that's a very good place to conclude. Just to the audience that's still listening, there will be a recording of the whole session of the 2 hours. We'll also have a feedback survey sent to you direct. And we hope to see you in our future events. And before I let everyone off, I'd like just to say a massive thank you to SHL and also to many of our silent partners from behind the scenes of both Hayes and of course SHL to make this event possible. And of course, a massive thank you to our esteemed speakers for your sharing today. Thank you, Ariel, Eddie, Anise, and Ada. And we certainly hope that the content was helpful and that the audience, that you guys were able to take a lot away from it. So if you'd like to learn more about both Hayes or SHL, you can find our contacts on this screen and also in our follow-up email. Thank you very much and have an amazing weekend.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.